A vast canvas fills the wall, yet it does not feel like a painting. It feels like air, like silence, like standing at the edge of water before dawn. Soft blues drift into green. Pink light trembles across a surface that might be sky or pond or memory. There is no horizon to steady you, no solid ground, only reflections folding into reflections, light dissolving into color. This is Water Lilies. People lower their voices in front of it without knowing why. Time slows. The world outside the museum, engines, voices, urgency, seems to belong to another reality. Here, there is only breath, stillness, and the sensation that light itself has been laid gently onto canvas. Not painted as an object, not described, but felt. Somewhere in these floating colors lives a human life. A pair of eyes that once watched morning mist rise from water. A mind that chose to follow sunlight across hours, across seasons, across years. A man who believed a moment of light could be more important than a story, a hero, or a grand historical event. But how does a person learn to see like this? How does the ordinary shimmer of water become a universe without edges? What kind of childhood, loss, struggle, and devotion shapes a mind that paints not things, but perception itself? Tonight, we step quietly backward in time, into the life behind the light. The slow, human story of Claude Monet. If journeys like this help you relax, see the world differently, or drift peacefully into rest, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts below. Your presence here keeps these quiet histories alive. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Watched the Light. Claude Monet was born in Paris in 1840, but the city of his birth never truly claimed him. His real childhood belonged to the northern coast of France, to Le Havre, where the sea breathed in long, grey rhythms, and the sky never seemed to hold one colour for long. It was a place of salt wind, wide horizons, and light that shifted like mood. Here, before he ever held a paintbrush with purpose, a quiet education had already begun. His father was practical, disciplined, and hopeful that his son would one day enter the family's grocery business. Stability mattered. Trade mattered. Respectability mattered. But Claude's mother was different. Gentle, musical, emotionally attuned. She sang. She encouraged. From her, the boy learned that sensitivity was not weakness, but a way of feeling the world more fully. Le Havre itself became his true teacher. Ships slid in and out of harbour under veils of fog. Sunlight fractured on moving water. Mornings arrived silver. Afternoons turned the sea into broken glass. Evenings melted the horizon into rose and ash. Other children ran, shouted, played. Claude watched. He noticed how shadows were not truly grey, but violet, blue, green. He noticed how faces changed under different light. He noticed reflections, the strange doubling of the world in puddles and tide pools. School did not hold him. The rigid structure of lessons felt distant compared to the living theatre outside the window. Yet he was not idle. He drew constantly. Quick charcoal caricatures of teachers, neighbours, townspeople. These sketches were humorous, exaggerated, observant. Even then, he was not copying appearances. He was capturing impressions, the tilt of a chin, the fatigue in an eyelid, the personality behind the face. Then, when Claude was 16, the ground beneath his inner life shifted. His mother died. Her absence hollowed the house. The one person who had understood his inward nature was gone, and with her disappeared a kind of emotional shelter. His father grew firmer, more distant. Practical concerns pressed closer. But grief did something quiet and irreversible. It deepened the boy's solitude, and in that solitude, his way of seeing sharpened. He walked more, sat longer by the water, watched clouds travel across the sky as if they carried messages he almost understood. Nature became less a backdrop and more a companion, steady, wordless, accepting. In the changing sky and tide, there was movement without judgment, transformation without loss. Light came and went, but always returned in another form. Long before the world would call him a revolutionary painter, Claude Monet was simply a boy learning to trust his eyes over instructions, his sensations over rules. He did not yet know he was training for a life devoted to light. He only knew that the world shimmered, shifted, and breathed, and that he wanted, somehow, to stay close to that mystery. Chapter 2. Learning to See the Air. By the time Claude Monet reached his late teens, drawing had already become second nature. His caricatures were well known in Le Havre. Shop windows displayed them, and townspeople paid a few francs to see themselves humorously distorted. It was a small success, but it was built on observation, not yet on art as destiny. That shift began with a meeting that would quietly alter the direction of his life. His name was Eugène Boudin. Boudin was not a grand historical painter, nor a celebrated academic master. He was something rarer for the young Monet, a painter of skies. He worked outdoors along the Normandy coast, setting up his easel directly under the open air. When he first invited Monet to join him, the teenager resisted. Oil painting felt serious, even intimidating, compared to the freedom of charcoal sketches. But Boudin persisted with gentle conviction. When Monet finally agreed and stepped outside with paints, something fundamental changed. Until that moment, art had meant lines, shapes, subjects. Now, standing before the sea with wind tugging at his clothes, Monet discovered that the real subject was not the boat or the cliff or the figure walking along the shore. It was the air around them. Light moved across everything, unifying sky, land, and water in a single shifting atmosphere. Colors refused to stay fixed. A cloud passing before the sun could transform the entire landscape in seconds. Painting outdoors, en plein air, demanded speed, attention, surrender. Nature did not pose, it unfolded. Monet later admitted that it was here he received his true education, not in a classroom, but under the sky, watching how light dissolved boundaries between objects. Eventually, Paris drew him. The capital was the gravitational center of French art, home to museums, studios, and the powerful academy that dictated taste. In the Louvre, young artists copied the old masters, stroke by stroke. Tradition emphasized historical scenes, mythological drama, polished surfaces. The message was clear. Art should be composed, controlled, elevated above ordinary life. But Monet had already seen something different on the coast of Normandy. He did study the masters, but he also studied the streets, the riverbanks, the changing weather over the Seine. Paris itself seemed alive with fleeting effects. Smoke drifting between buildings, reflections trembling on water, crowds dissolving into motion. The city confirmed what the sea had first taught him. The world was not made of fixed outlines, but of relationships between light, color, and time. A quiet realization formed in him then, radical, though he could not yet name it. The world did not need to be improved by art. It needed to be experienced again, through art. Objects were secondary. Sensation came first. And from that moment forward, Monet was no longer merely a boy who drew well. He was becoming a painter who believed reality itself could be recreated through perception. One breath of light at a time. Chapter 3. Refusing the mold. Paris in the 1860s was not gentle to young artists without wealth or connections. It was a city of ambition, hierarchy, and rigid expectations. At the center of its art world stood the Salon, the official exhibition of the Académie des Beaux-Arts. Acceptance meant visibility, commissions, survival. Rejection meant obscurity. Claude Monet entered this world without patience for its rules. After a brief interruption for military service in Algeria, cut short by illness and family intervention, he returned to France with a strengthened resolve to paint. Yet the path forward was uncertain. His father offered limited financial support, but only on the condition that Claude pursue serious academic training. Reluctantly, Monet entered studios, absorbing technique while resisting doctrine. The Academy prized smooth surfaces, historical subjects, and careful composition. Brushstrokes were to disappear. Paintings were to tell grand stories, biblical, mythological, heroic. Monet felt none of this urgency. He did not want to reconstruct ancient epics. He wanted to paint the way sunlight struck a dress in a garden, the way shadow cooled the edge of a riverbank. This difference was not minor. It was foundational. Money quickly became a problem. Paint was expensive. Canvases were expensive. Rent was unforgiving. During these years, Monet formed a relationship with Camille Dancieux, a young woman who would become both his companion and his model. Their bond was tender but complicated by poverty. When Camille became pregnant, financial strain intensified. Monet oscillated between fierce creative determination and quiet desperation. The Salon rejected him more than once. Each rejection carried practical consequences: fewer buyers, fewer opportunities. Critics dismissed works like Women in the Garden as unfinished or improperly composed. They saw looseness where Monet saw vitality. They saw incompleteness where he saw immediacy. But hardship did something decisive inside him. Instead of adjusting to please juries, he moved further toward his instinct. He began to understand that what interested him most was not the subject itself, but the momentary conditions surrounding it. A dress in sunlight was not fabric. It was light breaking into fragments. A riverbank was not soil and grass. It was atmosphere shifting across plains. Around this time, Monet also began thinking in terms that would define his maturity. Repetition with variation. The same place could look entirely different at noon and at dusk, under cloud and under frost. He was less interested in narrative progression than in temporal change. Poverty remained constant. At moments, he considered abandoning painting for stability. Letters from this period reveal anxiety, pride, frustration. Yet beneath all uncertainty lay an emerging artistic identity. He would paint what he saw as he saw it, not what tradition prescribed. In choosing this path, Monet was not yet leading a movement. He was simply refusing a mold. The cost was insecurity. The reward was authenticity. And in the tension between survival and vision, the foundation of his lifelong pursuit was laid. To chase light across the surface of the world, even if the world did not yet understand why. Chapter 4. A sunrise that changed the language of art. In the winter of 1872, Claude Monet returned to Le Havre, the harbour city of his youth. France was recovering from war. Paris still carried the scars of upheaval, and the future of the nation felt uncertain. But one morning, standing by a hotel window overlooking the port, Monet saw something that had nothing to do with politics or history, and everything to do with perception. The harbour was veiled in mist. Smoke from industrial chimneys drifted into the pale dawn. Masts, cranes, and boats appeared only as faint silhouettes, and through the haze, a small orange sun hovered, its reflection trembling in the grey-blue water. It was not a dramatic scene. No hero, no myth, no moral lesson. Only atmosphere. Monet painted quickly, loose strokes, thin layers, suggestion rather than detail. The boats were not constructed with precision. They were impressions emerging through vapor and light. The water did not lie flat. It vibrated with color. The sun was a simple, warm note against a cool field. When asked later for a title, Monet reportedly answered with simplicity, "Impression, sunrise." In 1874, the painting appeared in an independent exhibition organized by a group of artists who had grown weary of the Salon's authority. They sought freedom, to show modern life, changing light, personal vision. But the public and critics were unprepared. One reviewer seized upon Monet's title with ridicule. "Impression," he wrote sarcastically, implying the work was merely a sketch, an unfinished blur lacking discipline. The word was meant as dismissal. Yet language has a way of turning. That single term, intended as insult, captured exactly what Monet and his companions were pursuing. Not polished illusion, but lived sensation. Not historical grandeur, but immediate experience. The name Impressionists took hold, first mockingly, then descriptively, and eventually historically. For Monet himself, the painting marked a threshold. He had not set out to start a movement. He had only tried to record what he saw. Air thick with moisture, light filtered through industry, morning arriving softly over water. But in doing so, he revealed a new artistic possibility, that the transient could be worthy of focus, that uncertainty of form could express truth. The harbour of his childhood had given him more than memory. It had given him a language. A sunrise lasting minutes had shifted the vocabulary of painting for generations to come, though Monet, at the time, remained a struggling artist, still facing doubt, debt, and resistance. History would remember the moment. Monet had simply followed the light. Chapter 5. Painting the moment, not the monument. After the exhibition that introduced the word impression, Claude Monet did not suddenly find security or universal praise. What he gained instead was clarity. The path he was walking, uncertain, criticized, financially unstable, was nevertheless the right one for his temperament. He would not paint permanence. He would paint change. Traditional painting treated objects as stable forms. A building had weight, a tree had structure, a figure had defined contour. Light described these things, but remained secondary, an accessory to the subject. Monet quietly reversed this hierarchy. For him, light was not decoration, it was architecture. Look closely at his canvases from this period, and outlines begin to dissolve. Brushstrokes remain visible, short and distinct, placed side by side rather than blended smoothly. Colors mix in the eye instead of on the palette. Shadows are no longer brown or black, but cool blues, violets, greens, alive with reflected color. What had once been background atmosphere now becomes the organizing principle of the painting. This approach was not carelessness, it was discipline of a different kind. To paint this way required speed, because sunlight shifts by the minute. It required acute observation, because a passing cloud could alter the entire color structure of a scene. It required acceptance that no moment could be repeated exactly. Each canvas became a record of a specific encounter between eye, light, and time. Monet increasingly favored ordinary modern subjects: riverbanks, bridges, suburban gardens, railway stations filled with steam. These were not chosen for narrative importance, but for visual vitality. Smoke diffused light. Water fractured reflections. Glass and metal caught brightness in unpredictable ways. The modern world, often seen as harsh or industrial, offered him new atmospheres to explore. He also moved further away from the academic method of preparing careful drawings before painting. Instead, he began directly with color and sensation. Composition emerged from perception rather than formula. This unsettled critics who saw a lack of finish. But Monet was not chasing polish, he was chasing immediacy, the feeling of standing in that exact air at that exact second. Another subtle shift occurred: repetition. He realized that a single subject was inexhaustible because light never repeats itself. The same stretch of water at morning mist and evening glow were visually two different realities. This insight would later expand into full series, but already the seed was present. A motif was not a fixed thing, it was a stage for light's performance. What made Monet's style revolutionary was not abstraction, not theory, not rebellion for its own sake. It was fidelity to experience. He painted not what he knew objects to be, but how they appeared in lived perception, unstable, luminous, interdependent. In doing so, he invited viewers to slow down. To see that the world is not built from lines, but from relationships of color. Not from permanence, but from passing conditions. The monument stands still. The moment breathes. Monet chose the breath. Chapter 6. Against the Current. Innovation rarely arrives with applause. In the Paris of the 1870s, Claude Monet and the artists who exhibited beside him were not celebrated as pioneers. They were regarded as disruptors, undisciplined, careless, even dangerous, to the standards that had governed French art for generations. The official salon still defined legitimacy. Its juries favored clarity of form, historical narratives, moral seriousness. Paintings were expected to demonstrate technical control so refined that the artist's hand became invisible. In contrast, Monet's canvases displayed visible strokes, unstable outlines, and everyday subjects devoid of allegory. To many critics, this looked less like evolution and more like regression. Reviews could be harsh. Some called the works unfinished sketches. Others mocked their confused color. Viewers accustomed to polished surfaces felt unsettled by paintings that seemed to shimmer or vibrate. Where was the story? Where was the hero? Where was the discipline? Monet heard the criticism, but he did not retreat. Instead, he and his colleagues, Renoir, Pissarro, Degas, Sisley, and others organized independent exhibitions outside the Salon system. This act alone was radical. They were not merely offering new paintings, they were challenging institutional authority. The art world was structured like a hierarchy, and they had stepped outside it. Financial consequences followed. Sales were inconsistent. Public trust was limited. Monet, already burdened by family responsibilities, lived in cycles of debt and temporary relief. There were moments when creditors threatened to seize his belongings. At times, he relied on friends or sympathetic collectors simply to continue working. Yet the resistance they faced clarified something essential. This was not simply a stylistic disagreement. It was a philosophical divide. Academic art sought permanence, stability, narrative certainty. Monet's work embraced flux. It acknowledged that modern life, with its railways, factories, suburban expansion, had altered the texture of experience. Smoke and steam blurred outlines. Movement fragmented vision. Urban and industrial spaces created new optical conditions. To paint them honestly required new methods. Some critics feared this looseness signaled moral decline, that abandoning clear lines meant abandoning order itself. But Monet was not advocating chaos. He was pursuing precision of another kind. Precision in capturing fleeting light before it vanished. Over time, a small circle of collectors and supporters began to understand. They sensed vitality where others saw disorder. Gradually, purchases increased, though stability remained fragile. Through these years of tension, Monet's resolve hardened. Opposition did not dilute his vision, it refined it. If society found his work unsettling, perhaps it was because it revealed how unstable perception truly was. Art had always reflected its era. Monet was painting a world in motion, whether the world was ready to see itself that way or not. Chapter 7. Grief Beneath the Surface. While critics debated brushwork and institutions resisted change, Claude Monet's private life unfolded in quieter, more painful rhythms. Camille Dancieux had stood beside him through poverty and uncertainty. She had modeled for him, believed in him, endured the instability of a life tethered to art rather than security. Their early years together were marked by affection, but also strain. Money was scarce. Moves from one rented house to another were frequent. Bills accumulated. Children were born into rooms filled with canvases and worry. Then illness entered the house. Camille's health began to decline in the late 1870s, weakened after the birth of their second son. The exact medical diagnosis remains debated, but the result was unmistakable: prolonged suffering. Monet continued to paint. He had to. Yet the air inside their home grew heavy with fragility. There is a painting from 1879 that many viewers find difficult to confront. Camille on her deathbed. The brush strokes are present, but restrained. The palette is muted. Light rests gently across her face, almost detached, as if Monet was studying the subtle shifts of color, even in grief. It is not sentimental, it is observant. Some have interpreted this as emotional distance. Others see something more complex. A man whose instinct, even in anguish, was to register light as faithfully as possible. To paint what he saw was not indifference. It was perhaps the only language he knew for facing loss. Camille died at 32. Her death fractured Monet's world. He was left with 2 young sons, debts, and a silence that lingered in every room. Friends later described him as withdrawn during this period, restless and burdened. Yet he did not abandon painting. If anything, he worked with increased intensity, as though motion might prevent collapse. Soon after, his life became intertwined with that of Alice Ochede, the wife of a patron who had gone bankrupt. Their households merged out of financial necessity, forming a complex domestic arrangement that would, over time, deepen into partnership. The situation was unconventional, socially delicate, and emotionally layered. Stability came slowly, shaped by shared responsibilities and unspoken tensions. These years did not produce the brightest canvases of Monet's career. Tones darkened, scenes carried a quieter gravity, but beneath the surface, something was consolidating. Resilience. He had witnessed how swiftly joy could dissolve. He had seen light fall across a still face that would never wake. And yet, the sun continued to rise. Monet's commitment to painting light did not diminish in grief. It became, perhaps, more urgent. Light was fleeting. He knew this intimately now. Every reflection, every dawn, every passing cloud carried the knowledge of impermanence. Loss did not soften him into sentimentality. It sharpened his awareness of time. Behind the luminous canvases that would later define him lay this deeper current, a recognition that beauty exists alongside sorrow, not in denial of it. The surface shimmered. Beneath it, grief moved quietly, steady as an undercurrent in water. And Monet kept painting. Chapter 8. The Discipline of Light. By the 1880s and 1890s, something in Claude Monet's method crystallized into mastery. The years of criticism, poverty, grief, and experimentation had refined his instincts. He no longer painted merely to prove a point or to resist tradition. He painted with the calm certainty of someone who understood his subject completely. And his subject was no longer landscape in the conventional sense. It was time made visible. Monet began working in deliberate series, a radical decision that revealed the depth of his investigation. Instead of completing a single canvas and moving on, he painted the same motif again and again under different atmospheric conditions. Haystacks in a field, the facade of Rouen Cathedral, a line of poplar trees along a riverbank. To an outside observer, the repetition might have seemed obsessive, but for Monet, each canvas was a distinct event. Morning frost turned a haystack lavender. Midday sun flattened it into pale gold. Twilight dissolved its edges into blue shadow. The object remained constant. Perception did not. He often worked on multiple canvases simultaneously. When the light shifted, he would set one aside and pick up another corresponding to that hour. Assistants helped move easels as clouds drifted overhead. The process required extraordinary concentration. A moment missed could not be recreated exactly the next day. Nature never repeats itself with precision. This was no longer simple plein air enthusiasm. It was systematic study, almost scientific in discipline. Monet was mapping how light transforms form, how color relationships alter emotional tone. He was discovering that shadows are rarely neutral. They carry reflections from surrounding surfaces. Snow is not white, but infused with blues and pinks. Stone cathedrals become almost liquid under sunset. The Rouen Cathedral series marked a turning point in public perception. Exhibited together in the mid-1890s, the paintings astonished viewers. A Gothic structure long associated with solidity and permanence appeared mutable, vibrating, nearly dematerialized under different lights. Architecture seemed to breathe. Critics who had once mocked his looseness began to recognize coherence. What had looked unfinished in isolation now revealed itself as part of a larger investigation. Monet was not neglecting detail, he was redefining it. Detail lay not in carved stone or leaf veins, but in the subtleties of illumination. Financial stability improved during these years. Dealers such as Paul Durand-Ruel championed his work internationally, particularly in the United States. Sales increased. The precarious survival of earlier decades softened into relative security. Yet success did not slow him. If anything, it expanded his ambition. In 1883, Monet settled in Giverny, a village northwest of Paris. There he began shaping not only canvases, but environment itself. He cultivated gardens, planted exotic flowers, designed pathways. Eventually, he engineered a water garden with a Japanese bridge and a pond filled with lilies. It was not simply a home, it was a living studio. The breakthrough was not a single painting, it was a realization. He could construct the very conditions he wished to study. Light over water, reflections merging sky and earth, wind bending color into motion. What had begun decades earlier as a boy watching the sea now matured into a sustained exploration of perception. Monet no longer chased light across random landscapes. He invited it to live with him. And in that garden at Giverny, the next and most immersive phase of his vision began to unfold. Chapter 9. Between Applauds and Solitude. By the time Claude Monet entered the final decade of the 19th century, the tone of the art world toward him had changed. The laughter that once greeted the word impression had faded into something closer to respect. Collectors sought his canvases. Dealers promoted his work abroad. Exhibitions drew serious attention rather than ridicule. Recognition had arrived, slowly, unevenly, but undeniably. Yet outward success did not draw Monet toward the center of artistic society. Instead, it allowed him to move further away. At Giverny, his home became both refuge and laboratory. The garden expanded under his careful supervision. Flower beds were arranged not by botanical order, but by color harmonies. Paths curved with painterly intention. The water garden, with its pond and Japanese bridge, evolved season after season. Nature here was not wild, yet not rigidly controlled either. It was composed like a living canvas. Visitors came. Younger artists admired him. Critics wrote with increasing seriousness about his investigations into light. But Monet's daily rhythm grew more inward. He rose early, observed the weather, and worked outdoors when conditions allowed. His conversation increasingly revolved around atmospheric nuances, the exact tone of morning haze, the way wind rippled reflections, the color shift before rain. While his reputation solidified, the art world around him continued to move. Post-impressionists such as Cézanne, Gauguin, and Van Gogh were pushing form and color in new directions. Structure, symbolism, emotional intensity. These currents flowed alongside and beyond Impressionism. Monet was aware of these developments, but he did not follow them. He had found his terrain. Recognition brought financial ease, but not complacency. Instead of broadening his subjects, he narrowed them. The pond at Giverny became inexhaustible. A single cluster of lilies could occupy him for weeks. A shift in season altered the entire color architecture of the garden. There is a paradox in this period. Monet was widely known, yet increasingly solitary in his focus. Fame did not pull him into public life. It shielded his privacy. He rarely engaged in theoretical debates. He did not write manifestos. His statements, when given, remained practical and sensory. He wanted to paint what he saw, as faithfully as possible, under specific conditions of light. The world now accepted him as a master of modern painting, but Monet himself seemed less concerned with position than with continuity. The next morning, the next hour, the next reflection on water. Applause echoed from a distance. At the pond's edge, there was only wind, color, and the quiet task of looking, again and again, as if the act of seeing itself were endless. Chapter 10. The world applauds. The eye turns inward. As the 20th century approached, Claude Monet stood in a position that would have seemed unimaginable in his youth. His paintings sold reliably. Museums began to take interest. Collectors treated his canvases as treasures rather than curiosities. The once radical impressionist had become an established figure in modern art. Yet prosperity did not bring emotional stillness. Life continued to move through cycles of attachment and loss. Friends from earlier decades aged, scattered, or passed away. His companion, Alice Auchedé, who had helped anchor the complex household at Giverny, became increasingly fragile in health. The domestic space that had once been lively with children, guests, and shared meals gradually grew quieter. Monet's response was not retreat into inactivity, but deeper immersion into work. The water garden became his primary universe. Standing at the pond's edge, he could observe sky, trees, clouds, and flowers simultaneously, not as separate entities, but as reflections layered over one another. The surface of the water acted like a shifting mirror, erasing the boundary between above and below. In this space, the world lost its fixed orientation. Up and down blended. Depth and surface exchanged roles. This visual phenomenon mirrored something inward. With age came a heightened awareness of time's fragility. Monet had spent decades chasing fleeting light. Now he himself felt subject to that same transience. His paintings from this period grow more immersive, less anchored to conventional perspective. The horizon line often disappears. Edges soften. Space expands beyond the canvas frame, as if vision itself were dissolving into atmosphere. Outwardly, he was honored. Inwardly, he worked with almost private intensity. Visitors sometimes found him preoccupied, even abrupt, when weather conditions were right for painting. A particular quality of mist or sunlight could not be postponed for conversation. He moved between canvases like a conductor, guiding different movements of the same symphony, each corresponding to a distinct hour of day. The contrast between external recognition and internal focus widened. Public narratives celebrated him as a leader of a movement already historic. Monet himself remained fixed on immediate perception. What color the lilies carried at dusk, how clouds dimmed reflections, how wind fractured the sky across ripples. Fame belonged to the past tense. His work belonged to the present moment. In these years, painting was less a career than a necessity. Not ambition, but continuity. The world beyond Giverny changed. Technology advanced. Artistic styles shifted toward abstraction and structure. Monet did not oppose these developments. He simply remained devoted to his own inquiry. He had spent a lifetime learning to see. Now, as the world applauded, he turned further inward, not away from reality, but deeper into its most subtle conditions. Light, air, reflection, the quiet space where vision meets memory. And at the surface of the pond, the sky waited to be painted again. Chapter 11. When the body slows, but the light remains. Time, which Claude Monet had studied so patiently in the changing sky, began to mark his own body with equal persistence. By the early years of the 20th century, he was an old man by the standards of his era. The physical ease that once allowed him to work outdoors for long hours gave way to fatigue, stiffness, and the quiet negotiations of age. Gardening, once vigorous and hands-on, required more assistance. Moving large canvases demanded help. Even the act of standing before an easel for extended periods carried strain. Yet Monet resisted the idea of slowing down in any meaningful artistic sense. If his body imposed limits, his attention did not. There was, however, a more troubling change. Subtle at first. His vision began to alter. Monet developed cataracts, a clouding of the eye's lens that gradually dims clarity and shifts color perception. Whites yellowed, blues dulled. Light itself, the subject he had pursued for decades, seemed filtered through an invisible veil. At times, he complained of frustration. Painting, once an act of direct perception, now required interpretation of what he could no longer see sharply. But he did not stop. Instead, his relationship with color deepened into instinct. He relied on memory, on accumulated experience of how light behaves. Assistants helped label paint tubes. He sometimes repainted earlier works, dissatisfied with distortions he sensed but could not fully verify. The process was slower, more deliberate, yet no less intense. Emotionally, age brought a quieter tempo. The household at Giverny had thinned. The noise of earlier decades had softened into routine. Monet walked the garden paths, pausing at the pond, observing seasonal shifts with the same attentiveness he had always possessed, though now the act of looking carried effort. There is a tenderness in imagining him there, an aging figure before water, watching reflections he had painted countless times, knowing each view might be slightly beyond the clarity he once enjoyed. Yet perhaps this limitation altered not only difficulty, but depth. Light was no longer only external, it lived in recollection. The energy of youth had faded, but the discipline of seeing remained. If anything, painting became more essential, a way to stay connected to the world as the body signaled its eventual surrender. The sun still crossed the sky. Clouds still shifted across the pond. Lilies still opened and closed with the day. Monet met each change with the same quiet persistence that had defined his life, adjusting, enduring, returning to the canvas. The body slowed. The light did not. Chapter 12. A new century, a new language. As Claude Monet worked beside his pond at Giverny, the art world beyond his garden gates was transforming at a speed unmatched in previous generations. The new century did not simply extend the past, it fractured it. Young artists were no longer satisfied with capturing light as it appeared to the eye. They began to question the stability of form itself. Paul Cézanne's structural investigations suggested that nature could be reduced to underlying geometric relationships. Van Gogh's legacy emphasized emotional intensity over optical truth. Soon, bold color experiments of the fauves and the fragmented planes of cubism would push painting toward abstraction and conceptual structure. Compared to these movements, Impressionism could seem gentle, observational, even traditional. Monet was aware of these developments. Visitors spoke of exhibitions in Paris. Critics wrote of revolutions in form. But he did not chase novelty. He had spent decades pursuing a single, inexhaustible question: how light transforms what we see. For him, this question remained unresolved, still rich, still urgent. To some younger artists, Monet appeared as a respected elder, a foundational figure whose battles had cleared ground for their own experiments. To others, he belonged to an earlier phase, a master of perception, but not of modern abstraction. History, even before his death, had begun arranging him into categories. Monet resisted categorization by ignoring it. At Giverny, the rhythms of work continued with quiet consistency. He studied morning mist, afternoon glare, evening reflections. The pond did not care about art movements. The lilies did not align with manifestos. Light moved as it always had, indifferent to theory. Yet there is a subtle resonance between Monet's late works and the art emerging around him. As his compositions expanded, horizons dissolved, and space became immersive, his paintings edged closer to abstraction than he might have consciously intended. The world he depicted grew less anchored to identifiable structure, more devoted to sensation and color fields. Without declaring allegiance, Monet's vision quietly paralleled the century's shift. But his motivation remained unchanged. He was not seeking to deconstruct reality. He was seeking to remain faithful to it, to the experience of standing before water and sky, where form wavers and boundaries blur. The art world spoke in new languages. Monet continued speaking in light. Chapter 13. The Garden Without Horizon. In his final decades, Claude Monet turned almost entirely to the water garden at Giverny. What had begun as a cultivated retreat became an immersive universe, a space where earth, sky, plant, and reflection intertwined so completely that traditional perspective lost its authority. The water lilies were no longer simply flowers floating on a pond. They were points of color suspended within a vast field of shifting light. Monet enlarged his canvases dramatically. Some stretched several meters across, enveloping the viewer rather than presenting a framed scene. The familiar markers of landscape, horizon line, distant trees, grounding foreground, began to disappear. Instead, surface dominated. Water mirrored clouds. Branches entered from the edge without revealing their full structure. The world became a continuous field without clear beginning or end. This was not accident. It was culmination. Decades earlier, Monet had learned that light dissolves form. Now he allowed that dissolution to guide composition itself. The pond's surface flattened depth, while simultaneously suggesting infinite space. Without a fixed horizon, the eye wandered freely, uncertain where reflection ended and substance began. Yet these works were not tranquil in a simple sense. They carry density, layering, sometimes turbulence. Brushstrokes thickened, colors intensified. In certain canvases, reds and deep blues pulse with almost unexpected force. This shift was partly aesthetic, partly physical. His cataracts altered color perception, warming tones, muting blues. But beyond physiology, there was an emotional gravity. the world had entered the trauma of the First World War. Though Monet remained physically distant from battlefields, he felt the tremors of a society in rupture. In response, he committed himself to creating something expansive and contemplative, a place of immersion rather than fragmentation. He conceived a monumental installation of the Water Lilies panels for the French state, envisioning oval rooms where viewers would be surrounded by water, sky, and light. These works were not narrative paintings, they were environments, meditations without words. There is something profound in this transformation. The young Monet had painted harbors, bridges, cathedrals, identifiable places shaped by human activity. The late Monet painted surfaces so absorbed in reflection that human presence vanished entirely. No figures, no boats, no architecture. Only light interacting with water. It is as if, after a lifetime of observing the external world, he turned towards something more elemental, the pure relationship between perception and nature. Despite failing eyesight and physical fatigue, he persisted. Surgery for his cataracts in the early 1920s partially restored clarity, though color adjustments required patience and revision. Some canvases were reworked repeatedly. He destroyed others that dissatisfied him. The discipline remained uncompromising. In these late works, painting approaches silence. Forms hover between abstraction and memory. Space expands beyond containment. Time feels suspended, neither morning nor evening, but continuous presence. Standing before them, one senses not a depiction of a pond, but an invitation into perception itself. The garden at Giverny becomes less a location and more a state of seeing, boundless, reflective, without horizon. And in that boundlessness, Monet's lifelong pursuit reaches its most distilled expression: light, unanchored and infinite. Chapter 14. The Narrowing World. In the final years of his life, Claude Monet's physical world grew smaller, even as the spaces within his paintings expanded. Travel, once a source of visual discovery, faded from his routine. The coastlines, cities, and rivers of earlier decades gave way almost entirely to the familiar paths of Giverny. His days followed a restrained rhythm. Morning light through the garden, slow walks along gravel paths, pauses at the pond's edge where willow branches trailed over water and lilies opened with the sun. Assistants managed practical tasks, stretching canvases, preparing paints, moving large works in progress. Monet's role became concentrated: to look, to judge, to place color with deliberation. Visitors still came, but less frequently. Age and frailty made long conversations tiring. He preferred short exchanges, then a return to work. Letters from this period reveal concern with weather, seasons, and progress on the large decorative panels, rather than with public events or artistic debates. The outside world continued to accelerate. Cities modernized, art movements multiplied. But within the boundaries of his garden, time seemed cyclical rather than linear. Spring returned, leaves fell, ice formed on the pond and melted again. Monet observed these changes with the patience of someone who no longer expected novelty, only variation. This withdrawal was not bitterness or rejection, it was concentration. By narrowing his environment, Monet deepened his intimacy with it. A slight shift in cloud cover the angle of autumn light, the texture of water under wind. These subtleties filled his attention. The garden became a closed universe, rich enough to sustain him until the end. There is quiet dignity in this image, an elderly painter moving slowly between canvases taller than himself, adjusting a color note, stepping back, returning again. The world beyond Giverny receded, but perception remained vivid. His life had widened through observation. Now it narrowed into essence: pond, sky, reflection, paint. Chapter 15. The Last Morning Light. In the autumn of 1926, Claude Monet was 86 years old. The garden at Giverny had entered another cycle of fading leaves and cooling air. The pond, which had reflected decades of sky and season, lay quieter now, as if aware that its most faithful observer was nearing stillness. Age had taken its toll gradually. Cataracts had blurred his sight for years before surgery partially restored it. Even then, clarity came unevenly. His hands, once swift in response to shifting sunlight, moved more slowly. Yet until very near the end, he remained engaged, adjusting canvases, evaluating color, insisting on precision. There was no grand theatrical farewell, no public declaration. Monet's final months were marked by physical weakness, not drama. He continued to inhabit the same rooms, walk the same paths when able, look upon the same pond that had become both subject and companion. Those close to him observed a man who had spent his life in disciplined attention, still attentive, even as strength ebbed. On December 5th, 1926, Claude Monet died at his home in Giverny. It is said that his coffin was draped in black cloth, as custom dictated. But Georges Clemenceau, friend and former French Prime Minister, reportedly replaced it with a simple floral covering, objecting that black did not suit a painter of light. Whether embellished by memory or entirely precise, the gesture captures something true. Darkness felt incomplete as a final statement. Yet this chapter belongs not to symbolism, but to the man. At the end, Monet was neither movement leader nor art icon. He was an aging human being who had spent a lifetime standing before water, studying how morning differs from evening, how reflection alters reality. His concerns had been immediate and sensory. This shade of blue, that tremor of pink, the way wind disrupts symmetry. Death closed the eyes that had pursued light so relentlessly. The garden remained. The pond reflected winter sky, as it always had. There is a quiet symmetry in this conclusion. The boy who once watched the sea at Le Havre ended his days watching a smaller body of water, contained, cultivated, yet equally infinite in its shifting surface. He did not conquer nature, he observed it. And on a cold December day, the light moved across Giverny once more, without him standing there to follow it. Epilogue, where the light continues. After Claude Monet's death, the quiet pond at Giverny did not fade into obscurity. Instead, the vision he had pursued with such patience became foundational to the story of modern art. What began as an effort to paint fleeting impressions helped liberate painting from the obligation to imitate solid form. Monet's insistence that light and perception could be primary subjects opened pathways that later artists would explore in radically different ways. From the color intensity of early 20th century movements to the immersive fields of abstraction, echoes of his investigations into atmosphere and sensation continue to resonate. The monumental Water Lilies panels he conceived for France found their home in specially designed oval rooms at the Musée de l'Orangerie in Paris. There, viewers stand surrounded by curved walls of water, sky, and reflection, not looking at a scene, but standing within one. The experience fulfills Monet's late ambition, painting as environment, as space for contemplation rather than narration. His garden at Giverny, preserved and restored, remains a living extension of his work. Visitors walk the same paths, cross the Japanese bridge, and see lilies open under shifting light, much as he did. The place reveals how deeply environment and art had merged in his life. Monet has come to symbolize more than a style. He represents a way of seeing, attentive, patient, receptive to change. In a world that moves quickly, his paintings invite slowness. They remind us that no moment of light repeats, that perception itself is an ever-changing dialogue between eye and world. Tomorrow morning, sunlight will touch walls, water, streets, and leaves in ways it never has before. If this journey through Monet's life brought you calm, insight, or a new way of noticing the world, consider subscribing and sharing your reflections. Quiet histories continue because thoughtful viewers continue to gather, just as light continues to arrive, again and again.